Arrogant boxer forced a young black Jamaican man to fight to humiliate him. Then the unthinkable happened. "Look what we've got here," sneered Victor Sterling, pointing at the teenager who had just stepped through the polished glass doors of the exclusive Manhattan Boxing Academy. His mocking tones silenced the rhythmic thuds of fists pounding against heavy bags. Heads turned. Fighters, trainers, and hangers-on all stared at the newcomer. A lean, dark-skinned young man carrying a faded duffel bag, his sneakers worn nearly to the sole. That young man's name was Kemar Campbell, only 18 years old, his wide eyes carrying both nerves and determination. The stark difference between him and the immaculate Jim was striking. Membership fees here cost more than 3 months of minimum wage, yet Kemar's calloused hands and fraying clothes told the story of someone who had scraped every penny just to stand in that place. Victor Sterling, at 26, had reigned as America's pride in the ring, two-time world boxing champion, adored by sponsors and notorious for his sharp tongue as much as his quick fists. He had built an empire of arrogance, throwing insults online that fueled his fame. His latest post, a smirking flex of his muscles captioned, "When you're born superior, you don't need to pretend to be equal," had already racked up 500,000 likes. "Sorry," Kemar muttered, double-checking the address on his cracked phone screen. "I thought this was the youth scholarship program." Victor's laugh echoed across the room like a cruel siren. "Scholarship program? Kid, this isn't a charity. We don't babysit here. We train real athletes, not sob stories." The word stung, but Kemar stood still. He had come to the U.S. only 6 months earlier, his Jamaican family pooling every coin to buy his plane ticket. Since then he had been cleaning office buildings 16 hours a day, sharing a small Bronx room with 3 other immigrants. This program, if it even existed, was his only shot at real training. "The program does exist," interrupted a firm voice. A veteran trainer named Tom Rodriguez, owner of the gym, emerged with a folder in his hand. "And Kemar Campbell is on the approved list." Victor rolled his eyes so hard it seemed they might get stuck. "Really, Tom? You're turning my facility into a community center now? My sponsors won't like this one bit." "Your sponsors pay for your fights," Tom answered dryly. "They don't decide who gets to train here." But Victor wasn't finished. He stepped closer to Kemar, grinning like a predator. "You want to train with the big boys? Then prove you belong. How about a little test?" The gym quieted instantly. Everyone knew what was coming. "A friendly spar," Victor announced, savoring the words. "You against me. 3 rounds. If you survive, you can stay. If not," he waved his hand dismissively. Every eye locked on Kemar. This was a trap, a public humiliation designed to break him before he even began. But in Kemar's eyes burned something Victor couldn't place, a flame that didn't waver. "I accept," Kemar said calmly. Victor smirked, expecting fear. "Are you sure? Because when I'm through, you'll wonder if dreaming this big was worth it." "I'm sure," Kemar repeated, and for the first time since entering the gym he smiled. What Victor Sterling didn't know was that in the streets of Kingston, Jamaica, Kemar Campbell was already whispered about under a certain name, Lightning. And like real lightning, his power only revealed itself in the storm. While Victor plotted how to turn the boy's humiliation into viral content for his millions of followers, Tom Rodriguez studied the determination in Kemar's face. He felt a familiar chill, one he'd only known when recognizing a truly rare fighter hiding behind humble appearances. The rumor of a spar between the arrogant champion and an unknown Jamaican immigrant spread like wildfire. Within an hour, other boxers, trainers, and even a few journalists had rushed to the gym. It was cruel entertainment, the kind social media devoured. 3 rounds, 16-ounce gloves. "Just sparring, no bets, no broadcast," Tom declared, trying to contain the circus. Victor laughed. "Relax, Tom. This will be over so fast the kid won't even touch me." He was already recording for his Instagram story. "You guys won't believe this. Some nobody thinks he can spar with me. Watch me teach him a lesson in humility he'll never forget." Comments flooded in. "Destroy him, champ. Show him his place. America on top." While Victor basked in the attention, Kemar headed to the locker room. His hands weren't trembling. They never did before a fight. But inside his chest, his heart beat with controlled fire, the kind forged in nights of hunger and fists on rough Kingston streets. Tom followed him. Kemar, you don't need to do this. I know the scholarship is important, but it's not worth risking injury because of Sterling's ego. I won't get hurt, Kemar replied, pulling on borrowed gloves. He's a world champion, Tom pressed. 2 years at the top. He's got knockout power, footwork, experience. And I've got something he'll never have, Kemar said, meeting Tom's eyes. Tom frowned. What's that? Hunger. The word reverberated in the small locker room. Tom had trained hundreds of fighters in 30 years, but rarely had he heard it spoken with such conviction. Hunger, true hunger, wasn't about ambition. It was survival. Tell me, Tom asked softly, why'd you even accept his taunts? Why not just walk away? Kemar closed his eyes, flashes of Kingston returning, his mother's desperate pleas to avoid fights, his fists striking with surgical precision, the name Lightning whispered with both fear and respect in back alley brawls. Because I've lived this story before, he said. Guys like Sterling think they can break us with their words, with their arrogance, with the certainty that we're beneath them. But they forget something important. What's that? Those who grow up fighting for survival don't fight for sport. They fight to exist. Tom shivered. There was something prophetic in those words, as if Kemar wasn't just talking about a spar, but about destiny. Back in the gym, Victor continued his mockery, pointing at Kemar's tattered sneakers left in the corner. Look at this, guys. Kid probably learned to box on YouTube. Laughter rippled, but a few veterans stayed silent. They sensed something different about the young Jamaican's composure. Marcus Williams, a former middleweight champion, whispered to his sparring partner, "Man, I don't know. I've seen that calm before. Sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous." But Victor Sterling, drunk on his own arrogance, didn't notice the warning signs. You know what the problem is with people from third world countries? He said into the camera. They mistake desperation for skill. Just because life's tough doesn't mean you can fight. At that moment, Kemar stepped back into the gym. He wore only simple shorts and a tank top, but his arms were surprisingly cut, his movements smooth and efficient, like a predator conserving energy. Ready to learn, kid? Victor asked sarcastically. Always, Kemar replied. Victor had no idea that Lightning Campbell had been throwing fists since he was 8. Not for medals or glory, but because it was fight or go hungry. By 12, he was beating men older and stronger than him in underground matches, earning enough for his family to eat. By 16, he was already a legend in Kingston streets, not for brute force but for reflexes so sharp he seemed to predict moves before they happened. And though he had sworn never to fight again after arriving in America, some promises had to be broken when dignity was on the line. Tom Rodriguez adjusted Kemar's gloves one last time, and as he did, he noticed something strange. The boy's hands were relaxed, fluid, but the density of the muscles beneath his skin was unmistakable. These were not the hands of an amateur. These were the hands of someone who had fought his whole life, even if not under official rules. Kemar, Tom said quietly, have you really never fought before? Kemar gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. Define fought, he answered cryptically. Tom studied him carefully. In 3 decades of training he'd seen countless rookies, but never had one moved with such unconscious economy. Kemar's balance was perfect, his breathing measured. It was the kind of composure most fighters only found after years of grueling matches. Meanwhile, Victor Sterling strutted across the gym floor like it was his personal stage. He was live streaming again, the phone held up in one hand while he shadowboxed lazily with the other. You see this, guys? He told his millions of followers. They actually want me to waste my time on some random Jamaican kid who can barely afford shoes. This will be the easiest spar of my life. The comment scrolled rapidly across his screen. Crush him, champ. Send him back where he came from. This is gonna be hilarious. Victor fed on the energy. Arrogance was his oxygen. He didn't notice the way the older boxers along the wall had gone quiet, their trained eyes narrowing as they watched the way Kemar carried himself. One of those watching was Marcus Williams, a retired champion whose face still bore the scars of 15 years in the ring. He leaned toward his partner and whispered, "You see that? The kid isn't nervous. He's cold. That's not a rookie." Back in the locker room, Tom decided to push a little more. "Kemar, why are you really here? Why accept a fight against Sterling of all people?" Kemar tightened the straps on his gloves, then looked straight into Tom's eyes. "Because men like him think respect comes from titles, from money, from skin color. He thinks I'm a story for his followers, a joke. But where I come from, you don't ask for respect. You take it. And when someone tries to strip away your dignity, you don't walk away. You show them who you are." Tom felt a chill. He had heard many young fighters claim they were hungry, but rarely had he felt the truth of it so deeply. At that moment, the gym doors swung open and a tall, broad-shouldered man entered. His presence drew whispers. His skin was dark, his knuckles thickened by years of combat, his eyes sharp as blades. Kemar froze for the first time since arriving. "Uncle Winston," he breathed. Winston Campbell, 50 years old, had once been a feared name in underground circuits across the Caribbean and Miami. His hands bore scars from 1,000 fights in places without referees, and his reputation in Kingston had been one of respect and fear alike. "What are you doing here?" Kemar asked, his voice uncertain. "I came because I heard my nephew lost his mind," Winston replied, his Jamaican accent heavy. "I thought you promised me you'd left those days behind." Tom looked between them, startled. "You two know each other?" Winston gave Tom a long, calculating look. "Know him? I raised him in the fight game. From the time he was 8, this boy was beating kids twice his size. By 12, grown men didn't want to face him in the alleys of Kingston. His nickname wasn't Lightning for nothing, it was a warning." Tom's eyes widened. So the calm, the balance, the uncanny reflexes, it all made sense now. Across the gym, Victor continued his performance for TikTok. "Guys, get ready." The Jamaican even brought his family to watch him get embarrassed. "Isn't that cute? Don't worry, they'll have plenty to console him about afterward." His followers flooded the stream with laughing emojis. Winston shook his head, disgusted. "Arrogant fool," he muttered. "He doesn't even realize what kind of storm he's walking into." "Uncle, please," Kemar whispered, his jaw tight. "Don't tell anyone." "Don't tell them what?" Tom asked, pressing. "That this boy right here," Winston said, pointing at his nephew, "was the most dangerous street fighter Kingston ever saw. By 15, gangsters gave him space. By 16, the name Lightning Campbell was legend." Tom's jaw dropped. "Then why'd he stop?" "Because when he got his visa, he swore to his mother he'd never fight again," Winston said firmly. "But some promises can't hold when your dignity is on the line." Kemar lowered his eyes. He hadn't wanted anyone here to know. He wanted a fresh start, a chance to build a life outside the shadows of blood and fists. But Sterling had forced his hand. Meanwhile, Victor was on the phone with his manager. "Michael, this is going to blow up. A world champ versus some immigrant amateur. Sponsors are going to love it, total domination." His manager's voice crackled through the speaker. "Just don't hurt him too badly, Victor. We can't afford lawsuits. Make it flashy but keep it safe." Victor laughed, loud and sharp. "Relax. He'll be on the floor before the second round. It'll be over before he even realizes what hit him." Winston overheard and leaned toward Tom. "If you've got any money, bet on Lightning. Victor might be a champion, but he's never fought for survival. He's never looked at defeat and known it meant going hungry. My nephew has. That kind of fighter doesn't care about fame or cameras. He cares about proving a point." Kemar walked back from the corner where he'd been warming up, sweat already shining across his brow. His eyes were focused, unreadable. Tom asked one more time, "Kemar, why accept this? Why not just keep your head down and train?" Kemar's voice was cold. "Because men like Sterling think they can humiliate us, laugh at us, put us in our place. To him, I'm a nobody, a story for his followers. But I'm not here to be anyone's joke. Where I grew up, respect isn't given, it's earned. And sometimes the only way to remind them is to let the storm hit." He smiled then, a sharp, dangerous smile that carried the weight of every street fight, every hungry night, every scar earned. The crowd began to gather tighter around the ring. Phones were raised, the sound of recording apps clicking on. What had started as a friendly spar was now an event, the kind that would be shared, clipped, and dissected across the internet by morning. Victor Sterling climbed through the ropes, basking in the cheers of his supporters and the glow of his live stream. He raised his gloves high, flexing for the cameras. "This won't take long," he boasted. Kemar slipped between the ropes quietly, no theatrics, no posing. He just rolled his shoulders, bounced lightly on his feet, and settled into the center of the ring with a stillness that made more than a few spectators uneasy. The contrast was glaring. Victor, the self-proclaimed king, surrounded by lights and noise. Kemar, the silent shadow, carrying the weight of survival in every measured breath. Tom, stepping into the role of referee, glanced at both men. 3 rounds, no knockouts intended, clean sparring, he said firmly. Victor smirked. "Yeah, sure." The bell rang. Victor exploded forward, unleashing a flurry of quick jabs meant to intimidate. But every punch sliced only empty air. Kemar wasn't there. He moved like smoke, like water slipping through cracks, always one step ahead, his feet gliding across the canvas as though he already knew where each punch would land. "What the?" Victor muttered, his smile faltering. The crowd gasped. Kemar hadn't thrown a single punch yet, but his control over the ring was undeniable. He was dictating the pace without raising a fist. "Stay still, kid," Victor barked, his voice tinged with irritation. He pressed harder, increasing the power of his punches. But in his eagerness he overcommit. And that's when it happened. The exact moment Victor's balance tipped, Kemar struck. His left fist whipped across with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot through the gym. Victor stumbled back, clutching his cheek in disbelief. He had been hit, clean, sharp, devastating, by someone he had called a joke. The gym fell silent for a beat. Then, like a storm breaking, whispers rose among the crowd. "Who is this kid?" someone muttered. Winston smiled faintly from the sidelines. "That," he said proudly, "is Lightning Campbell." Victor staggered backward, his gloves rising in a panic as he tried to steady himself. He couldn't believe it. No one had landed a clean shot on him in years, not even seasoned contenders, and yet this kid, this so-called amateur, had tagged him with surgical precision in the opening exchange. The crowd buzzed, phones held higher now, capturing every second. For the first time, Victor wasn't in complete control of the narrative. "You lucky boy," Victor spat, shaking it off, his arrogance slipping into anger. "Won't happen again." But Kemar wasn't listening. His eyes were locked in, his breathing calm, his stance effortless. He didn't look like someone trying to survive. He looked like someone who had already mapped the entire fight in his head. Victor lunged forward, unleashing a brutal combination, jab, cross, hook. The kind of sequence that had dismantled countless opponents. But Kemar moved as though the punches had been rehearsed for him, slipping just inches outside each blow, countering with a body shot so sharp it forced the air out of Victor's lungs. "Ugh!" Victor grunted, his face contorting in pain. Gasps erupted around the gym. The spectators weren't just seeing a lucky hit anymore. They were witnessing something calculated, deliberate, artistry in motion. "Jesus," muttered Marcus Williams from the sidelines. "That ain't a rookie. That's a predator." Victor, humiliated, tried to smother his panic with rage. He roared and threw a looping right hand, hoping to crush the kid's defenses. But Kemar dipped low, sliding inside the arc, and delivered a crisp uppercut that snapped Victor's head back. Sweat sprayed under the fluorescent lights like sparks flying from steel. The phones recording the match caught it all. Some people couldn't help shouting. "Holy hell, he caught him again. Who is this kid?" Victor stumbled, but forced himself upright, his ego refusing to let him admit what was happening. He barked to the crowd, "Don't worry, I'm just warming up." But the laughter was nervous now, not confident. His followers in the live comments were shifting too. "Why does he look shook?" "Yo, that Jamaican kid is fast." Winston crossed his arms, his eyes never leaving the ring. "This is what I told you," he murmured to Tom. "Victor's never fought hungry. Lightning doesn't waste energy. Every move means something." Tom nodded silently, goosebumps prickling his arms. He had trained world champions, But what he was seeing in Kemar was something rarer. A fighter who carried survival itself in his fists. The bell rang to end the first round. Victor retreated to his corner, his chest heaving, sweat rolling down his face. His trainer leaned in, whispering frantic instructions. "What the hell are you doing? He's embarrassing you. Cut the ring off. Pressure him. Don't let him breathe." Victor slammed his gloves against the ropes in frustration. "He's nothing. Just a fluke. I'll crush him." But his voice cracked with doubt. Across the ring, Kemar sat on the stool calmly, sipping water from a plastic bottle Winston handed him. His uncle's voice was steady, not loud, just clear. "You don't need to hurt him, bad nephew. Just show them the truth. Show them what lightning really means." Kemar nodded once. No bravado. No speeches. Just focus. The second round began, and this time Victor charged with fury. He cut the ring, tried to trap Kemar against the ropes, throwing heavy combinations meant to overwhelm. The crowd leaned forward, phones trembling in their hands, expecting to see the Jamaican finally fold. But instead, Kemar slipped, pivoted, and danced. His movements were fluid, precise, almost ghost-like. Victor swung with power but hit nothing but air and leather. "Stand still, damn it." Victor barked, swinging wildly. And then crack. A straight right hand from Kemar connected flush with Victor's jaw. The sound echoed like a whip through the gym. Victor's knees buckled and he stumbled back into the ropes. The crowd erupted. "Lightning! Lightning!" A chant began, small at first but swelling with each second. Victor shook his head desperately, trying to clear the fog. His pride demanded he keep going. He stormed forward again, throwing wild punches, but Kemar punished every mistake. A jab to the temple. A hook to the ribs. A blistering countercross that snapped Victor's head sideways. The undefeated champion was unraveling. "Unbelievable," whispered Tom, his heart racing. "I've never seen anything like this." In the livestream chat, Sterling's fans were panicking. "What's happening? He's getting destroyed. This can't be real." Victor's trainer screamed from the corner, "Stay back. Reset." But Victor couldn't hear. His pride had taken over and pride was drowning him. Kemar, on the other hand, was ice. His eyes tracked every twitch of Victor's shoulders, every hint of an incoming punch. He wasn't just fighting. He was orchestrating, conducting a symphony of precision violence. And then came the moment no one expected so soon. Victor threw a desperate left hook, his balance off, his feet too wide. Kemar stepped inside, pivoted, and unleashed a blistering four-punch combination. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. It was so fast the phone's recording barely captured it in blur. Each punch landed perfectly. Victor's mouthguard flew, his body crumpling backward. Time seemed to freeze as he collapsed onto the canvas like a tower crashing down. The gym exploded with sound. Shouts, gasps, cheers, the frantic click of cameras. "Down goes Sterling." Marcus Williams shouted, unable to contain himself. Victor groaned, struggling to push himself up, but his body betrayed him. His legs wobbled, his arms limp. For the first time in his career he looked helpless. Tom knelt beside him, counting. 7, 8, 9. But Victor couldn't rise. At 10, Tom raised his hands. Knockout. The crowd erupted, people chanting Kemar's name, others laughing in disbelief. The livestream comments had exploded into chaos. "The champ is done. This Jamaican kid just destroyed him. Lightning Campbell." Victor's trainer rushed into the ring, cradling his broken fighter. His phone buzzed in his pocket, but he already knew what it would say: sponsors pulling out, public outrage, humiliation. Meanwhile, Kemar walked calmly to his corner, his face serene. He hadn't celebrated, hadn't raised his fists in triumph. He simply removed his mouthguard and handed it to Winston. Victor, still dazed, looked across the ring at him. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes, only something closer to fear, maybe even respect. Kemar leaned over just enough for Victor to hear him. His voice was soft, almost pitying. "You said you wanted to teach me a lesson. I hope you learned that respect isn't earned by belts or skin or money. It's earned by character." Victor's eyes filled with tears of humiliation. Around him, the world was shifting. His social media posts meant to mock Kemar were already going viral, for the wrong reasons. The comments were merciless. "This is what arrogance gets you. The Jamaican just schooled the champ." Winston placed a proud hand on his nephew's shoulder. "You're still Lightning," he said. Kemar shook his head. "Lightning was who I had to be to survive. Today I'm something else." His eyes scanned the crowd, some cheering, some filming, all watching. "Today I fight not just for survival but for dignity." And though the spar was over, everyone in that gym knew it was only the beginning. The gym was chaos. Some people were cheering wildly, others stood frozen in disbelief, and nearly everyone had their phones in the air, recording or live streaming what had just happened. The air buzzed with shouts. "Lightning Campbell. Did you see that? The champ just got dropped by a rookie." For the first time in years, Victor Sterling wasn't the center of admiration. He was the center of ridicule. He sat slumped in his corner, head hanging, his trainer fanning him with a towel as medics checked his jaw. His chest still heaved from exhaustion. He looked more like a beaten amateur than the reigning face of American boxing. Victor's phone, dropped carelessly on the floor of the ring, continued buzzing with notifications. His live stream hadn't stopped. Millions had just witnessed his humiliation live. The chat was flooded with laughter, memes already being created, screenshots being shared across every platform. One comment pinned itself across the feed: "Lightning Campbell ends the champ's reign in 3 rounds." Victor groaned, finally realizing that he hadn't just lost a spar. He'd lost something far greater: his image. Kemar, meanwhile, stood quietly in the opposite corner. He hadn't raised his arms in victory, hadn't taunted his opponent, hadn't even smiled. His expression was calm, almost solemn, as if this outcome had been inevitable. Winston stepped into the ring, gripping his nephew's shoulder firmly. "You see, Kemar? You didn't just beat him. You exposed him." Kemar said nothing, simply nodding. His heart wasn't pounding from adrenaline anymore. Instead, it beat with a strange mixture of relief and clarity. He had proven himself not only to Sterling but to everyone watching. Tom Rodriguez approached, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked between the defeated champion and the silent Jamaican. "Kid," Tom said, shaking his head in awe, "I've been in this sport 30 years. I've seen world champions, Olympic medalists, fighters born with talent. But whatever you've got, it's different." Kemar met his eyes steadily. "What I've got is hunger." The crowd's noise rose again as news spread beyond the gym. Reporters rushed forward, shoving microphones through the ropes, demanding interviews. But Kemar turned away, uninterested in the spotlight. He hadn't come for fame. He'd come to earn the right to train. Across the ring, Victor's trainer was on the phone, his face pale. "Yes, I saw it. Yes, it's everywhere already. No, I can't stop the footage." His eyes flicked to Victor, who sat with ice pressed to his swollen cheek. "Sponsors are furious. They're already threatening to pull deals. They said he made them look foolish." Victor heard those words and closed his eyes in despair. He had been the golden boy, the poster child of American boxing. Now, with one viral clip, his empire was crumbling. Winston leaned close to Kemar, speaking low. "Don't let this moment fool you, nephew. Today you won more than a spar. But tomorrow the world will come knocking. They'll want to use your story, your fists, your name. Don't let them own you." Kemar nodded slowly. "I'm not here to be owned. I'm here to fight." By the time the gym emptied, the damage was already done. Within hours, clips of Victor being knocked out were trending worldwide. On Twitter, hashtags like #LightningCampbell and #SterlingFall surged. Memes flooded Instagram and TikTok, replaying the knockout with captions like, "When arrogance meets reality," and "Never underestimate hunger." Victor's sponsors began releasing statements. Nike, Gatorade, and Everlast distanced themselves, some outright terminating contracts. By midnight, his Instagram account had lost nearly 200,000 followers, the comments section filled with ridicule. This is what happens when you underestimate people. World champ? More like world chump. Kemar Campbell just ended your career, bro. Victor smashed his phone against the wall of his apartment later that night, rage boiling in his chest. But he couldn't escape it. Every channel, Every feed, every sports show replayed his humiliation in slow motion. Meanwhile, Kemar returned quietly to the Bronx. His small rented room felt unchanged, though the world now saw him differently. He placed his worn gloves on the nightstand and sat heavily on the edge of his bed. His roommates, fellow immigrants, erupted in cheers when they saw him. "You did it, Lightning. You destroyed him," one shouted. But Kemar only smiled faintly. It wasn't about destroying him. It was about proving I belong. Still, he couldn't deny the weight of what had happened. For the first time since stepping onto American soil, he felt something shift. He was no longer invisible. He had forced the world to see him. The next morning, Tom Rodriguez's phone rang before dawn. "Hello, this is ESPN," said the voice on the other end. "We'd like to schedule an interview with you about discovering this." Lightning Campbell. Tom chuckled softly. "Discover? No. He's always been who he is. The world just saw it today." Winston, too, was flooded with calls from old contacts, some offering contracts, others warning him about the dangers of sudden fame. He brushed them off. His only focus was his nephew's future. By noon, the gym itself had transformed. Lines of young fighters from disadvantaged neighborhoods were already forming outside, inspired by the viral clip. They wanted to train where Lightning Campbell trained, to believe that maybe their hunger too could take them somewhere. Tom watched from his office window, shaking his head in disbelief. "One fight," he muttered. "One fight and everything changes." And indeed, everything had changed. Victor Sterling, once untouchable, now faced the collapse of his career. His arrogance had backfired in the most public way possible. And Kemar, who had entered the gym with nothing but a duffel bag and worn sneakers, had emerged as a symbol. Not just a symbol of boxing talent, but of something deeper. Proof that resilience, hunger, and dignity could topple privilege and arrogance. But as Winston warned his nephew later that night, this storm is only beginning. Today you showed them who you are. Tomorrow they'll want to test you. Are you ready for that? Kemar tightened the straps on his gloves, his eyes blazing with quiet fire. "I've been ready my whole life." 3 days after the infamous spar, the boxing world had already split into two camps. On one side were the die-hard Sterling fans scrambling to defend their idol, claiming it was just sparring and didn't count. On the other side, louder and growing by the hour, were those who had watched the clip 100 times and knew what they had seen. Victor Sterling had been outclassed, outthought, and dismantled by a boy no one had ever heard of. The internet was merciless. Sports blogs ran headlines like, "World Champ Crumbles Against Unknown Jamaican," and "Lightning Strikes in Manhattan Gym." Memes plastered Victor's face on storm clouds, GIFs replayed his collapse in endless loops. His arrogance had been his brand, and now it was his curse. Victor sat in the dark of his penthouse, blinds drawn, phone buzzing endlessly. His manager Jerry paced back and forth, voice rising. "Do you realize what you've done? Nike's gone. Gatorade's gone. Even your reality show deal evaporated overnight. One spar, Victor. One stupid spar and you've tanked your career." Victor slammed his fist against the table, making the glasses rattle. "It was a fluke. Some punk kid got lucky. I'll come back." "Oh." Jerry cut him off sharply. "Come back. Do you even hear yourself? The whole world saw you knocked out cold. They don't care if it was sparring. They care about the story. And the story is you got humiliated by a nobody. That's the kind of stain you can't wash off." Victor's jaw clenched. He wanted to believe Jerry was wrong. But in his gut, he knew the truth. His empire was collapsing. Meanwhile, in the Bronx, life hadn't changed much for Kemar Campbell. He still woke up at dawn to clean offices, still shared a cramped room with 3 other immigrants. But everywhere he went, whispers followed him. On the subway, 2 teenagers nudged each other, whispering, "That's him. That's Lightning." At the bodega, strangers clapped his shoulder. On the sidewalks, kids mimicked his punches with wide grins. For the first time, Kemar felt seen, not as an outsider, not as another immigrant scraping by, but as someone who represented possibility. At the gym, the shift was even more dramatic. Where once Victor Sterling had been the star, now fighters crowded around Kemar, asking for tips, wanting to spar, eager just to be near him. Tom Rodriguez watched it unfold with quiet pride. "You've lit a fire, kid," Tom said one afternoon as Kemar finished a workout. "The scholarship program used to have 10 names on the waiting list. Now there's over 500. Kids are showing up from every borough, saying they want to be like Lightning Campbell." Kemar wiped sweat from his brow. "They shouldn't want to be like me. They should want to be better." Tom smiled. "That's what makes you different. You're not chasing fame, you're chasing something bigger." Within a week, calls began flooding in. Promoters who had once ignored Tom's pitches were suddenly begging to meet the Jamaican kid. ESPN requested a full feature. Even Golden Gloves Promotions, one of the biggest names in the business, sent a contract offer. Winston studied the paperwork carefully, his brow furrowed. $2 million for the first 3 fights, he muttered, eyes wide. With renewal clauses that could make it $50 million if you keep winning? Nephew, this is life-changing. Kemar stared at the papers silently. Money like that was unthinkable. He had been wiring every spare dollar back to Jamaica just to help his mother keep the lights on. $50 million was beyond imagination. But still he asked the same question, will they own me? Winston met his gaze seriously. Only if you let them. Remember what I told you, the world will come with its claws out. If you're not careful, they'll turn your hunger into a brand they profit from. Don't let that happen. Make them respect you, not use you. Kemar nodded. His uncle's words weighed heavily. Dignity was worth more than dollars. While Kemar's star rose, Victor's fall accelerated. Reporters camped outside his building, shouting questions about the knockout. Paparazzi caught him leaving a nightclub drunk. The photos splashed across tabloids with headlines like, "From Champ to Chump." His YouTube apology attempt was mocked relentlessly, comments filled with laughing emojis and sarcastic reminders of his arrogance. "This is your legacy now," Jerry told him bluntly during one meeting. "Not your titles, not your wins. The kid from Jamaica knocked you out, and the internet will never forget." Victor's hands shook with rage. "Then I'll fight him again. I'll prove it wasn't real." But Jerry only shook his head. "You don't get it, do you? No one believes in you anymore. And worse, they believe in him." Back at the gym, Tom gathered the young fighters one evening, pointing toward Kemar as he shadowboxed. "Watch carefully," he told them. "What you're seeing isn't just talent. It's discipline, resilience, hunger. That's what makes a fighter. Remember it." The room was silent as the kids watched every precise movement of Lightning Campbell's fists. For them, he wasn't just a fighter. He was proof that struggle could become strength. Kemar, though, carried it all with quiet weight. Alone at night, he replayed the fight in his head, not the victory but the look in Victor's eyes. Arrogance shattered into fear. It reminded him of the streets of Kingston, where every fight had been about survival, about proving you couldn't be broken. Now, in America it was different, but somehow the same. As he lay in his small bed, the city buzzing outside the window, Kemar whispered to himself, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning." And somewhere across town, Victor Sterling stared into a cracked bathroom mirror, fists clenched, pride bleeding into desperation. "This isn't over," he muttered. "It can't be." But deep down even he knew, the storm named Lightning had already rewritten the story. The contract signing happened inside a sleek glass office tower in Midtown Manhattan. Foremost fighters, the sight of polished tables, high-rise views, and men in suits would have been intimidating. But Kemar Campbell walked in wearing the same battered sneakers he had arrived in America with, his old duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He wasn't here to impress anyone. Representatives from Golden Gloves Promotions sat waiting, their polished smiles betraying their eagerness. They had smelled opportunity from the moment the viral clip of Victor's knockout spread worldwide. A story like Kemar's wasn't just a headline, it was a movement. "Mr. Campbell," said one of the executives, extending his hand with rehearsed enthusiasm. "Welcome. We're very excited to work with you." Kemar shook his hand briefly, then sat. Winston lowered himself into the chair beside him, his sharp eyes scanning every line of the contract. Tom Rodriguez stood behind them, silent but firm like a shield. The executive leaned forward, launching into a pitch. "You're the hottest name in boxing right now. Sponsors are lined up, broadcasters want your story, and fans can't get enough of Lightning Campbell. With our backing, you could be a global star within a year. Kemar's jaw tightened. I'm not here to be a star, he said simply. I'm here to fight. The executive blinked, momentarily thrown off by the bluntness. Winston smirked faintly. Tom leaned in. What matters is fair terms. He's not signing away his name, his story, or his dignity. If you want him, you respect him. The suits shifted uncomfortably. They were used to hungry fighters jumping at any offer. But this Jamaican kid, barely 18, was different. He didn't beg, he negotiated. After hours of back and forth, Winston tapped the final page and pushed the pen toward his nephew. It's solid. You'll get paid. And most importantly, you'll keep your freedom. Kemar signed slowly, each letter steady. When he lifted the pen, Winston clapped his back. Welcome to the pro ranks, Lightning. Outside the office, reporters swarmed, microphones shoved in his face. Kemar, how does it feel to be the man who humiliated Victor Sterling? One shouted. Kemar paused, then answered quietly. It wasn't about humiliating anyone. It was about proving I belong. Every fighter deserves respect. The word spread as fast as the knockout video itself. People began to see him not just as a fighter, but as a voice of dignity in a sport often built on trash talk and arrogance. Meanwhile, Victor Sterling's life was unraveling faster than he could catch it. His Miami mansion was listed for sale, his luxury cars repossessed. At the airport, cameras caught him arguing with airline staff after his first-class upgrade was denied, another viral clip that only fueled the public's ridicule. On social media, former fans openly mocked him. Remember when Sterling thought he was untouchable? Lightning took his soul. Arrogance has an expiration date. Victor's manager Jerry finally snapped. I can't do this anymore. You're toxic, Victor. Nobody wants you. Not sponsors, not promoters, not even the fans. You're radioactive. You can't just leave me. Victor shouted, but Jerry was already gone, slamming the door behind him. For the first time in his career, Victor Sterling was truly alone. Back in the Bronx, Kemar trained harder than ever. Now that he had a contract, expectations loomed heavy. The media wanted to crown him the savior of boxing, the underdog who would revive the sport. But Kemar didn't care for narratives. In his mind, there was only the next fight. Tom pushed him relentlessly in the gym. Early mornings on the heavy bag. Endless footwork drills. Sparring rounds with seasoned fighters who wanted to test the legend for themselves. Every punch, every slip, every pivot was sharpened until his movements became second nature. You can't rely on instinct alone anymore, Tom told him. At this level, everyone's strong. Everyone's fast. What will separate you is discipline. Control your fire, don't let it control you. Kemar absorbed every word. His hunger was still there, burning hotter than ever. But now, with Winston's wisdom and Tom's guidance, it was being shaped into something greater. The announcement of his debut fight hit headlines 2 weeks later. Madison Square Garden. Sold out in hours. His opponent, Carlos Mendez, a 24-year-old Puerto Rican with 12 straight wins and a reputation as a heavy hitter. Reporters swarmed Kemar again. Are you nervous about facing someone with Mendez's record? Kemar's answer was steady. Nervous? No. Respectful? Yes. But hunger beats records. The quote lit up sports pages. Fans across America and the Caribbean rallied behind him. Jamaican flags flooded arenas, hashtags like #Lightning Strikes trended for days. On fight night, the atmosphere was electric. Madison Square Garden pulsed with energy, the crowd roaring as the cameras panned across faces painted with flags. In the locker room, Kemar wrapped his hands carefully, Winston pacing behind him. You remember Kingston, nephew? Winston asked. Those nights when you fought with nothing but your fists and your will? Kemar nodded. I remember. Good, Winston said firmly. Because tonight nothing's changed. It's still just you, your hunger and your dignity. Don't fight for them. Don't fight for the cameras. Fight for you. Tom placed a hand on his shoulder. And remember, control the storm. As the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, Kemar walked out to the ring. The crowd erupted, chanting lightning. Lightning. His heart raced, but his face remained calm. He stepped into the ring like a man stepping into destiny. Across from him, Carlos Mendez bounced on his toes, smirking, confident. "I'm not Sterling," he taunted. "You won't embarrass me." Kemar simply raised his gloves, eyes locked. The bell rang. From the very first exchange, it was clear this wasn't a street fight. It was professional. Mendez threw sharp, disciplined combinations, his punches carrying heavy weight. But Kemar's reflexes were sharper. He slipped, countered, and landed clean shots that snapped Mendez's head back. The crowd roared. Commentators shouted over the noise. "This kid's the real deal." By the second round, Mendez was frustrated. He lunged, trying to corner Kemar against the ropes. But Kemar pivoted out, lightning quick, and unleashed a devastating hook that sent Mendez stumbling. Phones shot up, flashes popping. The chant grew louder, "Lightning! Lightning!" And as the round ended, Mendez's confidence wavered. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. In his corner, Winston leaned close to his nephew. "You've got him. Now finish what you started." The second round ended with Carlos Mendez breathing hard, sweat dripping into his eyes as he slumped onto his stool. His trainer barked instructions frantically, trying to steady him. "Keep your hands up. Don't chase him, cut the angles. You're letting him dictate the fight." But Carlos's eyes betrayed his confidence slipping. He had never been outmaneuvered like this, never faced someone who seemed to read his every move. Across the ring, Kemar Campbell sat calmly. Winston leaned close, voice low but sharp. "You see the doubt in his eyes? That's the same doubt Sterling had. Don't waste time. End it before he convinces himself he still has a chance." Tom added, "Stay composed. You're not here to brawl. You're here to prove you belong." Kemar nodded, rising silently when the bell rang for round 3. Carlos came out desperate, swinging with reckless power. His punches whooshed through the air, some grazing, most missing entirely. The crowd shouted with each exchange, the garden vibrating with energy. But Kemar was in rhythm now, slipping, ducking, pivoting with grace. Every miss from Carlos was punished with a stiff jab or a sharp counterhook. Then midway through the round, lightning struck. Carlos threw a looping right, his feet planted too wide. Kemar slipped inside, his body moving like water, and unleashed a devastating combination. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. 4 punches in less than 2 seconds. The sound echoed across the arena, glove on flesh, bone on bone. Carlos's head snapped back, his knees buckled, and his body collapsed onto the canvas. The crowd erupted. "Down goes Mendez," the commentator roared, his voice nearly drowned by the thunderous cheer. Lightning Campbell with a blistering knockout in just his debut fight. Phones flashed, cameras zoomed, fans leapt from their seats. The chant rose again, deafening now. "Lightning! Lightning! Lightning!" Carlos rolled weakly on the mat, trying to rise, but the referee waved it off. The fight was over. A knockout victory. Kemar didn't raise his hands. He didn't celebrate wildly. He simply stepped back, breathing steadily, his face calm as if he had expected this all along. The ring filled quickly, officials, trainers, cameras, journalists. Reporters shoved microphones toward him, voices overlapping. "How does it feel to knock out an undefeated fighter in your debut? Do you see yourself as the future of boxing now? What message do you have for fans watching around the world?" Kemar took the microphone, his voice steady despite the chaos. "This wasn't about proving I'm better than anyone. It was about showing that hunger and dignity can take you anywhere. To every kid out there cleaning offices, working doubles, being told you don't belong, remember this moment. You belong wherever your hunger takes you." The arena roared with applause. Even commentators fell silent for a moment, struck by the weight of his words. Winston watched with pride glistening in his eyes. "That's my nephew," he muttered. "Not just a fighter, something more." Tom nodded. "He's rewriting the sport." Meanwhile, across the country, Victor Sterling sat alone in a dim apartment, watching the fight on a cracked television. His face was pale, his fists clenched around a bottle of whiskey. When the knockout replay flashed in slow motion, Victor hurled the bottle against the wall. Glass shattered, liquid spilling across the floor. "That should have been me," he shouted at no one, his voice breaking. "I should still be the champ." But deep down he knew his time had passed. The world had moved on. And it had crowned a new king. Back at Madison Square Garden, the celebration poured into the streets. Fans waved Jamaican flags, chanting Kemar's name. Social media exploded with highlights of the knockout, hashtags like #LightningStrikesAgain and #HungerBeatsPrivilege dominating trends. That night ESPN's front page declared, "Lightning Campbell, from the Bronx to boxing's brightest future." Endorsement offers flooded in. Brands that once paid Sterling millions now turned their eyes to Kemar. Under Armour reached out with a proposal for a special line, "Earned, not given." Sports Illustrated requested a cover feature. But Kemar, exhausted, sat quietly in the locker room while the world celebrated outside. Winston placed a towel over his shoulders, his voice low. "You've just opened the door to a new life. But remember, doors swing both ways. You step through careless, they'll slam shut. Stay humble, nephew. Stay hungry." Kemar looked up, his eyes calm. "Uncle, I'm not fighting for fame. I'm fighting because I refuse to be invisible." Winston smiled faintly. "Good. Because the spotlight is on you now, and it burns brighter than any streetlight in Kingston." That night, as the city slept, videos of the knockout spread across the globe. In Jamaica, families crowded around televisions, cheering with pride. In the Bronx, kids shadowboxed in hallways, shouting, "Lightning Campbell." Across the internet, one message became clear. A storm had arrived in boxing. And its name was Lightning. Within 24 hours of the Madison Square Garden knockout, Kemar Campbell's name was everywhere. Sports channels replayed the fight on a loop, commentators dissecting every second of his flawless performance. Newspapers ran front-page spreads calling him the lightning bolt of boxing and the hunger that shocked the world. Social media was an inferno. Clips of the knockout amassed millions of views. Hashtags trended across continents. #Lightning Campbell, #From the Bronx to the World, #HungerBeatsPrivilege. Celebrities tweeted about him, rappers shouted him out in songs, and even the Jamaican Prime Minister released a statement congratulating him as a symbol of resilience and national pride. Back in the Bronx, Kemar tried to process the chaos. His roommates crowded around their cracked television, grinning ear to ear. "Bro, you're famous now. Do you realize people in Kingston were staying up all night just to see you fight?" Kemar only shook his head with a small smile. "It's not me they're seeing. It's the hunger. The fight in all of us." But fame didn't wait for him to catch up. By the second day, camera crews staked out outside his building. Journalists knocked at his door. Brands called Tom Rodriguez nonstop, begging for interviews, photo shoots, endorsements. Tom finally gathered Kemar and Winston in the gym office, shutting the door against the noise outside. "Listen," Tom said, his voice grave. "This is bigger than we thought. Everyone wants a piece of you. ESPN, HBO, Showtime, they're fighting to lock you into deals. Sponsors want you wearing their logos. But this is where most fighters lose themselves." Winston crossed his arms. "He doesn't care about their money. He cares about dignity." Tom nodded. "Exactly. And if we don't protect him, they'll twist his story into something it isn't. They'll sell him as a product instead of a fighter." Kemar leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Then we make the rules. I'll fight who needs to be fought. I'll train harder than anyone. But I won't be anyone's puppet. I won't trade my dignity for dollars." His words reminded Tom of something rare in sports: purity. This kid wasn't chasing the spotlight. The spotlight was chasing him, and he was still trying to walk his own path. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Victor Sterling watched the rise of Lightning Campbell with burning resentment. His career was ashes. His sponsors gone. His gym memberships canceled. His fans had turned into hecklers. Everywhere he went, people whispered, laughed, or mocked. On talk shows, former champions laughed openly at his downfall. "Sterling? Please. He's a meme now." Campbell exposed him. Victor seethed, replaying the knockout over and over in his head. The sound of the punch haunted his sleep. He punched walls until his knuckles bled, muttering to himself, "I'll come back. I'll destroy him. I'll take back what's mine." But no promoter would touch him. He was poison, his name synonymous with arrogance and humiliation. Back in the Bronx, Kemar began training harder than ever. Fame didn't relax him, it drove him deeper into discipline. Dawn runs through the cold streets. Endless rounds of shadow boxing. Sparring against seasoned pros brought in to test him. Tom pushed him, but Winston reminded him of balance. "Nephew," Winston said one night after training, "remember, the storm doesn't rage all the time. It waits, it builds, it strikes only when it matters. Don't burn yourself out proving what you've already shown." Kemar listened, but inside he felt the weight of expectation. The world was watching now. Every punch, every step, every word carried weight. His next fight was announced within weeks. Another undefeated contender, this time televised live on pay-per-view. The hype was enormous. Tickets sold out in a day. Fans lined up outside arenas with Jamaican flags, chanting "Lightning! Lightning!" In Jamaica, entire neighborhoods planned viewing parties. In the Bronx, kids began training with makeshift gloves, dreaming of becoming the next Lightning. The pressure was immense. On the eve of the fight, ESPN invited Kemar for a sit-down interview. The host leaned across the table. "Kemar, you've become more than a fighter. You're a symbol. How does it feel knowing millions look at you as proof that the underdog can rise?" Kemar thought for a long moment. "It feels heavy. Because I'm not a symbol. I'm a man who's fought to exist. If my story inspires others, I'm grateful. But at the end of the day, I'm just someone who refuses to be invisible." The clip went viral instantly. But with fame also came enemies. Rival fighters began calling him out, desperate to steal the spotlight. Online trolls accused him of being overhyped. Some sports analysts insisted his win over Sterling had been a fluke. "Let's see if lightning strikes twice," one sneered on live TV. Kemar heard it all, but he didn't respond. He let his fists do the talking. The night of the second fight arrived. The arena shook with noise as Kemar walked to the ring, Jamaican flags waving in every corner. His opponent, a muscular brawler from Chicago, grinned menacingly. "I'm not Sterling," he growled. "I'm not gonna be your next highlight reel." But 3 rounds later he was. Kemar dismantled him with surgical precision, his speed unmatched, his timing perfect. In the 4th round, a brutal countercross sent the fighter crashing to the canvas. Another knockout. Another storm. The crowd went wild. Commentators screamed. Social media exploded again. "Lightning strikes twice. This kid is the future." Afterward, reporters begged for a soundbite. Kemar gave them only this: "Respect isn't given by belts or fame. It's earned by character. Tonight I earned a little more." The humility, the calm, the dignity, people loved it. His fan base exploded beyond boxing. He became a cultural phenomenon, his name synonymous with resilience. But while the world cheered, Winston pulled him aside afterward, his tone serious. "Nephew, with every fight you gain fans. But you also gain enemies. There are men who will see your rise as a threat. Be ready. Fame isn't just a crown, it's a target." Kemar nodded, his eyes narrowing. "Then let them aim. I've faced worse than fame." And somewhere in a dark apartment, Victor Sterling watched the broadcast, fists trembling with fury, whispering to himself, "Lightning, enjoy it while it lasts. Because storms don't last forever." By the time Kemar Campbell had 2 knockouts on his professional record, the boxing world was in upheaval. He wasn't just another promising fighter, he was a phenomenon. Ticket sales spiked whenever his name was attached to an event. TV ratings soared. Promoters who once ignored the Bronx immigrant now competed desperately for his attention. Golden Gloves Promotions capitalized quickly, lining up bigger fights, negotiating sponsorships, and pushing his face onto billboards across Times Square. The image was powerful. Lightning Campbell, arms folded, a Jamaican flag draped behind him, the words "earned, not given." But with every step higher, the resistance grew stronger. Rival fighters snarled at press conferences, insisting he was overhyped. Analysts accused him of being protected, only given easy opponents to build his image. Online forums churned with arguments. Was lightning really the future of boxing, or just the latest viral sensation? Kemar ignored it all. He trained with the same discipline he had in Kingston alleys and Bronx gyms, sweat pouring as Winston drilled him relentlessly and Tom pushed his technique to perfection. The noise doesn't matter, Winston told him. When the bell rings, it's just you and the other man. Let your fists answer. But outside the ring, forces were stirring. Promoters whispered in backrooms, plotting ways to control him. One in particular, a ruthless businessman named Richard Klein, head of Titan Promotions, saw Kemar as a threat to his empire. Titan controlled most of the heavyweight market, and Klein had invested millions in building his own star, an American powerhouse named Derek the Machine Wallace. Wallace was a beast, 6 feet 5 inches, 240 pounds of raw power, undefeated with a string of brutal knockouts. He was supposed to be the future face of boxing. But Lightning Campbell's rise was overshadowing him, pulling headlines away. Klein seethed. If this Jamaican kid keeps stealing the spotlight, Wallace's value drops. We need to put Lightning in his place before he gets too big. Behind closed doors, he began making calls, setting traps, dangling offers, whispering rumors into the media to discredit Kemar. Meanwhile, Victor Sterling, still stewing in his fall from grace, watched with vengeful fascination. Every victory of Kemar's felt like salt in his wounds. His career was gone, his wealth evaporated, his name reduced to a punchline. But he wasn't finished. Not yet. One night, he sat in a dingy bar, scrolling through his cracked phone, when a familiar face slid into the booth across from him. Richard Klein. Victor Sterling, Klein said smoothly, swirling a glass of whiskey. The man who handed the boxing world to a kid from Jamaica. How's that taste? Victor glared but said nothing. Klein leaned closer, his voice low and poisonous. I don't need you to fight him again. I need you to help me destroy him. Victor's jaw clenched. Why would I help you? Because you hate him, Klein replied simply. And because I can give you a way back into relevance. You help me bring Lightning Campbell down, and I'll make sure your name isn't just a meme anymore. You'll be part of the story of his fall. Victor hesitated, shame and anger warring inside him. But the thought of revenge, of watching Kemar stumble, was too tempting. He nodded slowly. What do you want me to do? Klein smiled coldly. Spread the cracks. Feed the doubts. Remind the world he's not as perfect as they think. And when the time comes, we'll feed him to Wallace. Back in the Bronx, Kemar remained oblivious to the schemes. For him, life was still simple. Train, fight, survive. But Winston sensed the storm building. One evening, as they sat in the quiet gym after hours, Winston spoke seriously. Nephew, you've become a target. The higher you climb, the more knives aim at your back. Promoters, fighters, even men who've already lost to you, they'll come for your name, your story, your dignity. Are you ready for that kind of fight? Kemar laced up his gloves slowly, his gaze steady. I've been ready since Kingston. They can come with knives, with lies, with giants twice my size. I won't bend. I won't break. The announcement of his next fight sent shockwaves through the sport. Lightning Campbell versus Derek, the Machine Wallace. Madison Square Garden again. Two undefeated fighters, one carrying the weight of a nation, the other the full backing of American corporate muscle. The press went into a frenzy. Analysts debated endlessly. Could Lightning's speed and precision overcome Wallace's sheer size and power? Was hunger enough against a man nicknamed the Machine? At press conferences, Wallace flexed, towering over Kemar, grinning with menace. I'm not Sterling. I'm not some overhyped brawler. I'm a monster. And when the bell rings, I'll crush you. Kemar only replied calmly, monsters bleed like everyone else. The crowd erupted at the line, half cheering, half booing. The tension was palpable. Victor Sterling appeared on sports talk shows, suddenly visible again. He sneered into cameras, listen, Lightning caught me on a bad day. Don't overhype him. Wallace is gonna expose him for the amateur he really is. His bitterness was obvious, but the networks ate it up. In the Bronx, children painted murals of Lightning Campbell on cracked brick walls. In Kingston, families saved what little money they had to watch the fight on pay-per-view. Across the world, eyes turned toward the looming showdown. On the night before the fight, Winston sat with his nephew in the locker room. The arena outside shook with anticipation, but the room was quiet. "You know what they're calling this, nephew?" Winston asked. "David versus Goliath." Kemar chuckled softly. "Good. They've forgotten how the story ends." Winston grinned, pride shining in his eyes. "Then tomorrow remind them." The night of the fight felt like an earthquake. Madison Square Garden glowed under the spotlights, every seat packed, the air charged with tension. The sound of thousands of voices, chants, cheers, jeers, rolled like thunder through the arena. Cameras flashed, broadcasters shouted, and across the world millions tuned in. In Jamaica, families huddled around TVs, flags draped over shoulders. In the Bronx, entire blocks gathered in community centers, chanting Lightning's name. This wasn't just a fight, it was a global event. When Derek the Machine Wallace entered the arena, the ground seemed to shake under his footsteps. At 6 feet 5 inches and 240 pounds of pure muscle, he looked less like a man than a tank in gloves. His robe gleamed with Titan Promotions logos, his face split into a grin that was equal parts confidence and menace. The crowd roared, half cheering, half booing. Then the lights dimmed. A single spotlight pierced the darkness as Kemar Lightning Campbell made his walk to the ring. He wore no flashy robe, no diamond chains, just simple trunks with the Jamaican flag stitched across the waistband. His head was bowed, his focus unshakable. "Lightning! Lightning!" The chant erupted louder and louder until it swallowed the arena whole. In the commentary booth, analysts leaned forward, voices trembling with anticipation. "We are witnessing history tonight. Campbell, the underdog immigrant who shocked the world, against Wallace, the American powerhouse groomed to be the future of boxing." The fighters met at the center of the ring. The size difference was staggering. Wallace towered over Kemar, his shoulders broad as a wall. He sneered down at the smaller man. "I'll crush you, kid. You're nothing but hype." Kemar's eyes didn't waver. Storms don't ask permission to strike. The bell rang. Wallace charged immediately, unleashing a barrage of punches meant to overwhelm. His power was terrifying, each swing like a hammer, each jab rattling the air. The crowd roared with every thud against Kemar's guard. But Lightning wasn't there to stand still. He slipped, weaved, danced. His feet glided across the canvas, his body bending just inches outside Wallace's thunderous fists. Every miss made Wallace angrier, every slip chipped away at his composure. Still, the power was real. In the second round, one of Wallace's hooks grazed Kemar's temple, sending him stumbling. The crowd gasped. "Campbell's hurt," shouted the commentator. But Kemar steadied himself, his eyes cold, his stance resetting. He wasn't broken. He wasn't even shaken. In his corner, Winston's voice rang out above the noise. "Stay calm, nephew. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Control the storm." The third round began and Wallace came out slower, breathing heavier. He had swung wildly in the first 2 rounds, expecting an early knockout. But Lightning's defense had turned his power into wasted energy. Now it was Kemar's turn. He darted inside, snapping quick jabs that split Wallace's guard. A cross landed clean. Then a body shot. Then another. Wallace grunted, his massive frame jolting with each blow. The crowd's chant grew deafening. "Lightning! Lightning! Lightning!" By the 5th round, Wallace's confidence had cracked. Sweat poured down his face, his punches slower, his breathing ragged. Kemar, meanwhile, was fresh, his footwork crisp, his combinations sharp. Victor Sterling, watching ringside beside Richard Klein, leaned forward with fury burning in his eyes. "Come on, Wallace. Destroy him," he shouted, his voice cracking. But deep down he could see it, the machine was breaking. And then came the storm. In the 7th round, Wallace lunged with a desperate right hook, overcommitting his weight. Kemar slipped under it with perfect timing, pivoted, and unleashed a lightning-fast 4-punch combination. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. The sound was devastating. Wallace's head snapped back, his legs gave out, and his massive body crashed to the canvas with a thunderous thud. The arena exploded. The referee counted, the crowd screaming with each number. 7. 9. But Wallace didn't rise. 10. Knockout. The garden erupted in chaos. Fans leapt from their seats, flags waving, voices breaking into chants. Commentators screamed over one another. Unbelievable. Lightning Campbell just knocked out Derek, the Machine Wallace. David has slain Goliath. This kid is rewriting boxing history. Kemar stood in the center of the ring, gloves lowered, breathing steady. He hadn't celebrated, hadn't flexed. He just looked around at the roaring crowd with calm eyes, as if to say, "This is what happens when you underestimate hunger." Winston climbed into the ring, hugging his nephew tightly. "You did it, boy. You showed the world." Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones shoved in his face. "What do you have to say after knocking out the most feared man in boxing?" one shouted. Kemar raised the mic, his voice clear. "Respect isn't earned by size. It isn't earned by money or privilege or arrogance. Respect is earned by heart. And tonight I showed the world what heart looks like." The arena shook with applause. Meanwhile, Richard Klein's face darkened in the front row. His golden investment, Wallace, lay unconscious on the canvas. His empire had just taken a massive hit. And Victor Sterling, sitting beside him, stared at the ring with a mix of humiliation and rage. Lightning had done it again. Across the globe, the knockout replayed endlessly. In Kingston, crowds poured into the streets, waving flags, chanting Kemar's name. In the Bronx, kids danced in the night, imitating his punches. On social media, hashtags like #Lightning Strikes the Machine trended for days. Lightning Campbell wasn't just a fighter anymore. He was a movement. But Winston's warning echoed in his nephew's ear later that night, long after the celebration died down. "You've taken down Goliath, Kemar. But men like Klein don't lose gracefully. They'll come harder now. Be ready." Kemar nodded, tightening the tape still wrapped around his fists. "Let them come. Lightning doesn't fear storms, it creates them." The night after the knockout of Derek, the Machine Wallace, New York City didn't sleep. Car horns echoed through the Bronx as fans waved Jamaican flags out of windows. Streets filled with chants of "Lightning. Lightning," as if it were carnival itself. In Kingston, fireworks lit up the night sky. The entire island celebrated as if one of their own had just won the heavyweight crown. For Kemar Campbell, however, the celebration was brief. After the cameras faded and the noise died down, he sat quietly in the locker room, staring at his taped fists. Winston sat beside him, his weathered face lit with pride. "You've done what they thought impossible," his uncle said softly. "You've climbed higher than the world ever imagined. But the question is, what will you do with the mountain you now stand on?" Kemar didn't answer right away. His thoughts weren't on the millions cheering his name or the fortune waiting in endorsement deals. His mind drifted back to the alleyways of Kingston, where hunger gnawed at his stomach and dreams felt like luxuries. He thought of the janitorial shifts in New York, the invisibility, the constant battle to prove his worth. Finally he spoke. "I won't just fight for belts. I'll fight for the ones who feel unseen. If the world looks at me now, I'll make sure they see them too." Winston's eyes glistened. "Then you're more than a fighter, nephew. You're a storm that clears the sky." But not everyone was celebrating. In a luxury suite high above the garden, Richard Klein sat with a face like stone. His prized fighter had fallen. His promotion empire had taken a public beating. And the man responsible was an immigrant he had dismissed as a fluke. "This isn't over," Klein muttered, sipping his scotch with clenched teeth. "The storm won't last. Every storm passes." Beside him, Victor Sterling shifted uncomfortably. He had thought aligning with Klein would bring him redemption, but instead he watched his enemy rise even higher. Fans didn't remember Sterling's excuses, they remembered the knockout. His bitterness turned inward, corroding what little pride he had left. In the weeks that followed, Victor tried one last desperate grasp at relevance. He challenged Kemar publicly, demanding a rematch to prove the truth. But the boxing world laughed. Promoters scoffed. Commentators dismissed him outright. "Victor Sterling?" one analyst said on live TV. "He's history. The sport has moved on." Lightning Campbell erased him. The final humiliation came when Sterling showed up at a press conference for another fighter, heckling from the crowd, shouting Kemar's name. Security dragged him out as cameras rolled. The clip went viral, not as a comeback attempt but as another meme. Sterling had become a ghost haunting his own downfall. For him there would be no redemption. Meanwhile, Kemar's star only grew brighter. Endorsements rolled in, but he was selective, choosing deals that aligned with his values. He refused luxury ads that glorified excess, instead partnering with brands funding scholarships and community centers. When Sports Illustrated featured him on their cover, the headline wasn't about knockouts or belts. It read, "Lightning Campbell, fighting for more than glory." Back in the Bronx, Kemar poured his first earnings into renovating Tom's gym, turning it into a state-of-the-art training center for underprivileged youth. He insisted it remain free for kids. No one should pay for the right to dream, he told reporters. The lines outside the gym stretched down the block. Children from every background showed up. Immigrants, locals, kids who had never laced gloves before. To them, Lightning wasn't just a fighter. It was proof. Proof that hunger could defeat privilege, that dignity could triumph over arrogance. One evening after training, a young boy tugged at Kemar's arm. "Mr. Campbell," the boy said shyly, "they told me I couldn't do anything 'cause I'm too small. But you showed me I can." Kemar knelt, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Don't let anyone tell you what you can't be. The only one who decides that is you. Remember, lightning doesn't ask permission. It just strikes." As months turned into a year, Kemar racked up victory after victory. Each fight bigger than the last, each opponent more dangerous, each arena more crowded. But no matter how high he climbed, he carried himself with the same humility. He never strutted, never gloated. He spoke less about belts and more about purpose. His words began resonating far beyond boxing. Civil rights groups invited him to speak. Schools quoted him in classrooms. Newspapers called him a fighter for the invisible. In Jamaica, children painted murals of him in bright colors, fists raised to the sky. In the Bronx, his face appeared on murals too, not as a celebrity but as a neighbor who had risen. The storm of Lightning Campbell had changed the sport. But it had also changed people. Victor Sterling vanished from the headlines, his name now a cautionary tale of arrogance. Richard Klein nursed his wounded empire, but his monopoly had cracked. Other promoters now scrambled to sign fighters they once ignored, searching for the next Lightning. But there would only be one. Late one evening, long after another victorious fight, Kemar sat on the gym steps alone, the night air cool against his skin. Winston approached, carrying 2 cups of tea. "You're quiet," his uncle said, handing him one. Kemar nodded slowly. "Because I'm thinking, all storms end, don't they?" Winston sipped his tea, smiling faintly. "Yes. But storms leave behind clear skies. They wash the world clean. And what you've done, nephew, won't fade. You've given people hope. That doesn't end." Kemar looked out at the Bronx skyline, the city lights flickering like stars. He thought of Kingston, of his mother, of the long road that had brought him here. And for the first time he allowed himself to breathe, not as the underdog, not as the fighter, but as the man who had survived invisibility and turned it into lightning. He raised his cup in the air quietly, whispering to himself, "To every invisible soul, we are seen." And somewhere across the world, in crowded streets and quiet rooms, countless people felt the same truth deep in their bones. Lightning Campbell wasn't just a champion. He was a storm that had changed the world.